It's Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. What's up, humans? This is Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. So, the world is so divided. Here we go again. It's just constant politics in the news again. And, at this point, we have to protect our hearts and ourselves and what we want to surround ourselves with. And, I have many friends in the LGBTQ community who have showed their hurt and their fears. And I totally get it. It's like how, when you say I'm Republican, oh, but accept that. Oh, but except I'm okay if this, like people are trying to a la carte the side that they are on. It's not that way. If you are voting for the Republican Party, you are saying, I don't agree, I agree with the rules that they're putting in place for abortion. I understand if your religious belief is to not abort in case of blah blah blah, but you got to follow what their real plans are doing. And then to take away gay marriage, which what happened to the separation of church and state? Why do we care? Let people live their lives the way that they choose to, and they can choose whatever God they believe in and how they want to practice their faith, rather than involving those things. So you immediately, when you make that vote, that right-winged vote, you are saying, I'm okay with all of the things that come with it. And I think that's the problem. I would hope that the people that aren't super far right would start to, consider pushing more towards a libertarian party, a third party, if you really don't believe in those things, because by you submitting that vote, you are supporting the far right when you do that. And, I'm sure they could say the same thing. Oh, we don't want to go all to the left. But I think people need to do a little bit more research, because if I hear one more time that, oh, anybody who's a Democrat is a socialist, I'm like, okay, people, you need to do your research. That is totally not it. But anyways, I digress from politics for today with gerrymandering and everything that is happening. But I am very proud of Orlando. We managed to stay blue, true blue. But it's tough. It's tough. It's a tough thing. And all I can say right now is you have every right to, push away from people that support those things, because it is personal. It's personal at this point. Speaking of left-wing ideals, we're going to talk today about greenhouse emissions and how to save our planet and our environment. It's very, very important. And when you start reading these articles, of course, written by amazing journalists and activists, people that take the time to care about these things. We're all subscribed to the way that our world functions now, and we don't think twice sometimes when we ask for paper or plastic, or, when we're picking certain items off the shelf, because it's convenient. And some people would rather pay for convenience than to do the right thing. And so today we are going to be talking about recycling. Now, the common phrase that we all know is to reduce, reuse, and recycle. But that's not always easy. Everything is convenient, online shopping, Amazon, and it can be confusing. What goes in what bin? Do I recycle the jar if it still has sauce on it? We're going to kind of break those things down today, and hopefully this will help you when you're considering recycling. I've also got some links and some websites that you can go to make sure that you are going to the right places for those specific items. Also, a common trope with these, banks and things like that, realizing they're not really as, true to their theme as we would like them to be. So, for example, when they say, oh, we're going green, we're going paperless, that's not necessarily going to be helping our environment, because there actually is electronic waste and we're using up too much energy. Now, the US is doing great with paper. It's one of the most widely recycled materials in the US. So, as a society, we're working to protect our environment, and it's 91.4% of all cardboard boxes in the US were recycled in 2021. So, we are doing fantastic in the paper department, and I think that's an easier thing, especially with so many things being delivered in cardboard boxes. We're like, easy, I know what to do with that. Now, you should flatten them and break them down. It definitely makes it easier for the processing facilities, so that they don't have to do that, because they are putting them on conveyor belts, and it's easier to have a flat box than like a fully squared box. And where does this recycled paper go? Okay, so we've got 41% going to containerboard. We've got net exports, which is 33%. We've got box board, which is 12%. Tissue, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which is 7.1%, and newsprint and other types of, like magazines and things like that, 5.9%. So that is the amount. That's kind of our little, circular pie graph there of most of the paper and where it's, how much of it is going into our recycling. And if you've ever been near a paper mill, it smells absolutely disgusting. It is toxic, but we are, recycling, which is great. But it is crazy, the smell there. And I'm like, I've been near it, and I'm like, there are people that like live right next to a plant, and I'm like, you need to move away from this area. Like, it just concerns me for their health. And in fact, working in paper mills can be, hazardous to your health. You can get burns, you can get lacerations, poisoning, things like that. Of course, everything in moderation, because when you go to, like the national toxicology programs, they're like, oh, well, it's never been proven to cause cancer. But it does cause emissions like most things. But I suppose because we are recycling these things, that it's actually better to do that than to let the paper go into our compost. So paper is great. We know it's used for, boxes for our food, for our medicine, for tissue products, toilet paper, paper towels, our newspapers. So, paper is very widely used. And the paper industry can actually translate to our healthy drinking water. So the paper industry actually helps to ensure that forests are taken care of, instead of being, sold off for development or non-forest uses. And you'll be happy to hear that the paper industry does use every part of the tree. So the bark, it can generate bioenergy, and the paper mills reuse water at least 10 times before purifying and returning it to the waterways. Now, going to the paperless situation, like with the banks and things like that, that's really just for the companies to save money. It's not about the environment at all. So all forms of electricity generation have an environmental impact. And that's why we've been pushing, solar energy, geothermal, things like that to help with our climate changes. But it was funny when I was looking into this, and they're like, it's the cloud. And I'm like, nobody understands the cloud, and it really is this digital footprint that we're leaving just by using this. And like so many companies, switching from paper filing to electrical filing, like literally just the data that we use every day, our storage capacity uses so much energy. And that is also causing a carbon footprint. Not to mention the literal devices that we use all the time. So, how people, switch out their phones every year or every 2 years. We're talking about VCRs, stereos, televisions, computers, copiers. And, while a lot of these can be reused and recycled, they're not going through the proper recycling process. A lot of the recycling has open air, burning. It can leach into the soil and the water, and you can get toxic chemicals like lead and mercury and nickel. And, it's just a constant battle trying to recycle. And, a lot of these corporations, they are having these facilities. I mean, my trash, I think I pay $280 a year, for the trash. And then the recycling companies, like they recycle it and they make billions of dollars a year for doing it. And, another thing too, it's like when we recycle our aluminum, they use that aluminum for, making more, Coke can products or whatever, but it also goes into our automobile industry. Mostly we use steel, but with our trades and things like that, more and more people are starting to use aluminum, and it is lighter, but steel still being the number one material. But yeah, we use aluminum in our cars and so many other things. And aluminum is one of the easiest things to recycle, so continue to recycle those. But energy consumption is increasing by 9% each year. The cloud computing is rising rapidly, and that's increasing about 20% each year. So it's like, we invent these things thinking it's going to make things better, and then we have another problem. So it's hard, right? Because we are trying to learn from our mistakes, but once you kind of have something that becomes part of a entire infrastructure, it's like, how do you change it? Like once everybody gets used to it, and I'm doing this podcast so that people can just be more mindful about it, right? If this reaches enough people and people share it, then you can be more mindful about these things. And it's those little things you think it doesn't affect, but each little thing from everybody doing their part really will have an impact. You're also going to want to call your facility and find out what they do accept, because a lot of different companies accept different things, and we're actually trying to accept more plastics. Now, when you look on your little plastic bottle and it has that little recycling symbol, it's a triangle with the arrows. Just because that's there does not mean your product is recyclable. Now, each of these have numbers on them, and it tells the facilities what level of recycling capabilities it has. The lower the number, the more recyclable it is. So if it has a 1, most facilities will accept that. A 1 and 2 are pretty good. And actually in some states, people are accepting 5s. So I don't know what the difference is there, but they will not accept 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. But yeah, so the lower the number, the more recyclable it is. And you can just do that by looking at the bottle itself. You'll also see letters underneath it as well. So PET. So that's easy to remember. A PET is the number 1. And that is like polyethylene terephthalate. Those are the words. And that is more recyclable. And then the second one is high density polyethylene. So those are the two that are the more recyclable ones. And the other ones that are like have acrylic in them and fiberglass and nylon and things that the machines just cannot handle. Now, how do we recycle plastic bottles? So you're supposed to actually keep the cap on. I think some people, they drink it, they rinse it out, and they think it needs to like dry or something, and then remove the top cap and then throw that separately. Most caps are made of resin, which is a different plastic. Now, the facilities say do not separate them, because if you just think with common sense, anything that's small, we'll talk about flimsy plastic materials as well, it can get lost, and then it's just going to end up in the landfill, and then worse in our oceans and things like that, just because of how everything works in the processing. So keep those bottle caps on. They say to flatten the bottles, and I believe this is just to help them not float, to keep them flat, push the air out of it, and then put the cap back on. So they say to flatten the bottles. Then when it goes through the bottle reprocessor, they can separate the cap and sell that fraction for recycling. Now, when it comes to your beer caps, so your aluminum beer caps, what they say to do with those, which I am just guilty of throwing those into the recycling bin as well. They say to collect them in another tin can. So a vegetable can, and then you would pinch the top. So you would actually close the top of it so that it's just holding all of those caps in it. So maybe just have like a little, soup can and like leave it by your other recycling bin. And then anytime you have that metal, boom, you can just make a game out of it, like penny can, throw it in there and have some fun while you recycle. Teach your kids to do that, so just make sure you pinch it off so that it's all in there and then recycle that. I think that one's a pretty easy solution. The sad truth is that plastics will outlive us, and they will outlive our children and their children's children. Plastics, they are not biodegradable. Bottles could live up to 500 years. Plastic bags, toothbrushes, drinking straws, cutlery, plastic cups, all of these things. And the sad part is a lot of these end up in our oceans. Fun fact, gum has plastic in it. So the next time you're chewing gum, you can actually look at the ingredients on it, and you're going to see polyvinyl acetate. and that is plastic. So you can actually buy organic chewing gum, which now I'm like, I think I want to do that. But here's a cool thing. These companies have started making little pink bins that they hang up. Some are in airports now. So if you ever see it, it's a chewing gum bin so that you specifically can throw your gum in there. Why? Because it's actually recyclable. So I thought that was really cool. So if you ever see these like round plastic bins like up on the wall, you can just boom, drop your gum in there rather than throwing it on the floor or getting it stuck to someone's shoe or hair or whatever disgusting place you decide to stick your gum. So I would say first and foremost, the thing you should do is start buying organic gum, and then maybe a lot of these plastic gums will go off the market. And two, recycle your gum. That's what you should do. You can even recycle your gum, I believe, probably in like laundry detergent containers or any rubber or plastic item. And I know we're not chewing gum in our houses very often, but that would be what you should do. And then just keep an eye out for the what they call the gumdrop containers. So keep an eye out for those. I heard that Heathrow Airport has them, and a bunch of other places are having successful recycling with these. So airports and different malls, shopping malls, things like that. I think that's great. Now, before we continue on other things that you can do to be a better recycler, the history of this is that we started recycling around the 1970s. That's when it was popular and people were actually doing their part. And that changed when America started sending all of our recycling to China in the year 2000. So the problem with that is we're shipping it on these huge boats, and it got into the ocean, of course. They had these like trash islands in China, huge amounts of plastic, and it was just for China to take care of. This is their problem now. And we didn't care because it was out of sight, out of mind, right? But then recently, China said, no more. And they actually started caring about their own environmental issues. So they stopped accepting our recyclables in 2018. So now that's why we're having this whole thing again where America's trying to rethink recycling and do our part, because it's like, oh crap, it's our problem again. So that's why it's so important. So the main rule of thumb is to keep it clean. So when you are doing your recycling, they did just start accepting pizza boxes, and pizza companies have been pretty good about putting that little like sheet at the bottom, whether it's like a baking sheet or whatever, so that it's easier for the box to be clean. You want your jars to be rinsed out and be clean. I mean, just think about that common sense wise. If someone were to give you a bunch of that, do you expect these recycling companies to take each jar and clean them? No, they're not going to do that. They want you to do it and then recycle it. And it really doesn't take that long to rinse it out. So do yourself a favor, help the planet, rinse out your jars, make sure all the gunk is off of it, and then you can toss it. Also, with our number 5 plastics, that includes straws. So you might want to also collect your straws in another number 5 bin, and then find out if your local facility accepts those number 5 plastics as well. And in further research, locally for Orange County, they actually say to throw away the bottle caps in the green bin. Now, the problem with that is that they're loose, they're small, and they end up getting lost. And then this is why we have thousands of bottle caps in the ocean. So that's why it would be better to find another number 5 container and then put bottle caps and straws inside of that so that they don't get thrown around and loose. Otherwise, a lot of facilities will say to leave the bottle caps on. And if you do, they're still going to do their best, because they do have a process where they use a pressurized system to expel the caps and flatten the bottles. And then the plastics are soaked in water. And then the bottle with the number 1 will sink, and the cap, which is like a number 5, will float. So then they kind of separate it. It's like cranberries, but for recycling. It's also great. OrangeCountyFlorida.net has literally a search tool where you can just search like, how do I recycle this? And it'll pop up and tell you exactly how to do it. So that's a really valuable link. And then Earth 911 is also a great link, and it'll kind of teach you a little bit more. So that's earth911.com. It'll teach you a little bit more about recycling if you forget anything that we talk about today. Things you shouldn't recycle, plastic bags from the grocery store. Really try to either bring your own bag. Like at Aldi, you can bring a bag and bring your food home and just keep reusing it, or ask for paper. Plastic, you can actually, those bags, you can bring back to your local grocery store. So actually a lot of Publixes will accept the bags back to recycle. We don't want to do any plastic foam, styrofoam, inflated packing. That will all go in your green bin. Plastic plastic air pockets, soft plastic. So soft plastics are the issue because they don't break down properly. So they can get stuck in the machines. And so they actually have people that work at these facilities just sorting these plastic bags out and just grabbing them off the belt as they're going in. At one point, I know somebody said, yeah, you can throw them in there. And I think that was a terrible rumor that went around. You need to grab those plastic bags, save them all, either just continue to reuse them, or you need to recycle them and you can bring them to your local Publix and they can take care of it their way as well. Also, egg companies have been great. They've been switching from styrofoam to paper. So the next time you're buying eggs, maybe consider to get the paper ones. And hopefully those other companies will learn to not use styrofoam because styrofoam would go in the green lid and the paper can definitely go in the blue lid for recycling. Also, as the holidays approach, not all wrapping paper is created equal. So if it has, foil and all kinds of crazy coloring on it, that is not going to be recyclable, which is why a lot of people started like wrapping their gifts in like newspaper and just like plain, brown wrapping paper and then decorating it with cute strings. Of course, the roll that it comes on is made of cardboard, so you can recycle that. So please do that as well. And litter boxes, anything obviously made of cardboard, you can recycle. Just try to make sure you're breaking down those boxes first before you send those out. You'll also have a large item collection day. So if you do have those mattresses or TVs, you can schedule that and they will come out and pick up those large items and make sure that they are recycling them properly. And then paint cans, of course, are household hazardous waste. So you have to go and drop those off at your collection facility. And I really think the biggest thing is just cleaning the things out. If you have a soapy shampoo bottle, yes, you can put that in the blue bin, but don't put it in there all soapy. I know. It's like, oh, I got to clean this out. And it takes like at least, 2 to 3 minutes. But, you are helping save the planet in those 2 to 3 minutes because it's just going to go into the green bin. They're just going to be like, sorry, it's dirty. I can't process it. So make sure they are clean and dry. We do this all the time. We wash out our jars, we dry them, and then we recycle them. If you have a pet, think of all of the cans that you have, just like really rinse those out, the lids and the bottoms, and then toss them in the recycling. They actually have a phrase for it. They call it wish cycling. It's like you throw something in the bin that's dirty and you wish that it gets processed properly and that like they'll just take care of it, but they won't. So that's why it's important that we all do our part. Also, making a list, like hang a list of the things, in case you forget, like, oh, I forgot, does styrofoam go in this bin or this bin? Write out that list, hang it up somewhere, and then you can get your kids involved in doing that as well. We love recycling. Like it definitely keeps us from having bags and bags of trash. And then it just makes us feel good. Also, mailers. So I was, always curious about this one. Even the mail envelopes that you get with the windows, you can recycle those as well. I was sure it was going to be like, oh, well, because it's a soft plastic, but you can actually do that. Coupons, things like that. You're not supposed to like put cut up credit cards, basically anything small, even wet newspaper. Sometimes the people will throw them at your driveway. They'll get stuck out in the rain. So unless you dry out that paper, even the casing it comes in, do not put that soft plastic casing. Take the casing out, dry out the newspaper, then you can recycle the newspaper, but not while it's wet because it gets all mushed up in the machines. But if it is wet, you could make seed paper out of it instead of drying it out. Also, you would think because it's small, but staples can stay on because they are made of metal, and the machines can handle them because the magnet will pull them out. So then what about books? So not all books are created equal. Soft cover books, first of all, they recommend that you just donate them so that we can keep reusing them. But soft covers are usually okay, but the hard covers, the issue is the spine and how that's built together with like the glue and things like that. So unless you are feeling like taking the time of ripping all of the pieces of paper out and then recycling the paper, typically the hard cover part is not recyclable and they'll tell you to put it in the green bin, unfortunately. But soft cover is okay for your blue lid. They like to call the reusing of these things upcycling. So, very artistic ways of reusing a book that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before. So that way it's not ending up in the landfills. Also, just anything sticky, just think about that. That's not going to work in the machine. So even stickers can't really be going into the recycling. So take anything, sometimes you'll get those magazines and there'll be like one little thing in there with like a pack of stickers. If you're going to throw that out, rip the stickers out and put the stickers in the trash. As well as any of those like little tacky, like sticky things that keep things together, just trash it because it's not going to process well in the facilities. Also, I was kind of surprised to read this as well, especially in Orange County. They want you to put the aerosol cans in the green lid. So I guess these are not recyclable, even though it looks like, hey, some of this is made of plastic and aluminum. They actually want that to be in the green lid, not in the recycling bin. Our Orange County facility also says that it's okay to leave the labels on the bottles. A lot of people recommend ripping them off first and just having the bottle part, especially because there could be adhesive on them. But a lot of these facilities, I guess, can handle it. And that's because a lot of these facilities use like an excessive heat, and it kind of like burns just that little bit of it off so that it doesn't contaminate. And this next one, I think, is the most important. In the world of hustle and bustle and coffee drinkers, we cannot put our plastic Keurig coffee pods in the recycling. That needs to go either in a separate bag. I know that Nespresso gives you a bag and you can drop off. So always look at those companies. I mean, even Rainbow Sandals is like, here, give us your old sandals back and we'll recycle them for you. There are lots of options. So don't ever be afraid to ask a company like, hey, do you offer bags? And then we can recycle them separately. And coffee cups. So anytime that you go out, yep, you're getting that little plastic cup with the plastic lid and you're like, oh, I can recycle this after I drink my coffee. You cannot. They want you to put it in the green bin, which is still a form of recycling, but just make sure that those are attached together. They don't separate because they're a little bit smaller with the lids. But those coffee cups should not go in a blue recycling bin. And just on a personal note, it must be some sort of detachment or emotional blunting or something, but I could just never leave like a McDonald's bag in a parking lot or throw something out the window or leave a bottle on the beach. Like I find myself picking up other people's trash sometimes. It really doesn't take much effort. Another thing that I thought was useful is disposing of light bulbs. Now, your local facility will usually say put it in the green bin for garbage, but you can also just collect the bad ones and then drop them off at a Lowe's or a Home Depot, and they will dispose of them properly. And then what about if you break a dish, right? Porcelain, ceramics. Now, if it's glass, yes, you can recycle it. Try not to put little itty bitty pieces in there just because they can like fly around. But if they're pretty big pieces, those ceramics and dishes should go actually in the green lid unless it's glass, and that can go in the blue lid. But try to avoid recycling broken glass. But the facilities have gotten more advanced. They have this eddy current magnet, and then they have like the conveyor belt with these like sensors underneath it that can sense certain types of materials, and they use like these fast air jets. And so they've got this like infrared like light sensors. So it's definitely gotten more advanced. But just make sure you're checking because not all facilities are created equal, of course. Plastic seems to be used everywhere now. It's even in our clothing and places like Trader Joe's. I mean, lots of, grocery stores with the single-use plastics. So we're trying to get away from that and you get away just from that convenience. And even just, resorting and going back to refillable even detergent bottles, refillable options. I remember when I visited my grandmother up north, I thought it was so cool. She's like, yeah, you just paid like 50 cents and you can refill your jugs at this location with this like natural spring water. And I was like, that is so cool. It's like almost archaic, but really neat, and, it's something that is going to help our planet, and it might take a little extra effort, but you are getting the good stuff, and we are helping our environment and ozone layers. And I think that's what is important, because all these plastics are going to these incinerators and just being burned and, causing these greenhouse emissions. I mean, that's where the bad plastics go, is just being burned and causing chemical, hazardous, toxic waste to go into our environment. There are petitions that you can sign to. We want to get our world leaders to sign a global plastic treaty, just kind of like the Paris Agreement. We just want to start new things so that we can get everybody on board and to be held accountable. So find those petitions that you can sign as well. Every signature counts in those scenarios, because plastic really is a killer. It's causing deforestation and contaminating our potable water. Women are at larger risk of health complications because of the exposure to plastic products. And I'm sure it contributes to infertility. And companies like Coca-Cola are one of the worst offenders. They contributed in South Africa about 81.38% of single-use plastics to the environment. And those are the PET disposable plastics packaging. And, they also support the, gas and oil hungry, fossil fuels companies. And the fossil fuel industry plans to increase plastic production by 40% over the next decade. So they're building, petrochemical plants and, turning fracked gas into plastic. And that's how plastic bags start out. They start out as fossil fuels, and then they end up as deadly waste in landfills and the ocean. Birds have been, dead birds have been cut open and looked inside their stomachs, and just plastic just falls out of their stomachs. And then think about that. We are fishing and getting these fish, and then we are also eating microplastics in our food, just because it's just a cyclical process, right? So we put the plastic in the landfills, that gets, into the ocean, especially like those tiny little pieces, like the bottle caps, and then the fish eat them, and then we eat the fish, and then we're just ingesting this. And the plastic bags too, like turtles are mistaking them as jellyfish, because turtles, eat jellyfish, so they can't distinguish the difference. They're like, oh, it's floating like a jellyfish, I think it's a jellyfish. And it's just passing up the food chain. And some researchers expect that we actually eat the equivalent of like a credit card of plastic a week. And you're also inhaling it in the air as well. And they also expect that there'll be more plastic than fish in the sea by 2050. And think about this the next time you ask for paper or plastic. It only takes 14 plastic bags for the equivalent of the gas required to drive 1 mile. Plastic also inhibits our oxygen. The chemicals from the plastic bags actually impair the growth of those microorganisms that, provide the oxygen that we need. And in Hawaii, they actually found 100% of the albatross chicks in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands ingested plastic, every single one of them. And your cocktail of the day is the pumpkin pie smash. First, you're going to have to make your pumpkin pie syrup. That's going to be equal parts 1 cup sugar, 1 cup water, and then a 1/3 cup of actual pumpkin puree. You're going to put 1/4 to 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice for flavor, and a little bit of vanilla extract, about 1/2 teaspoon. Whisk over medium heat until the sugar has melted. Add the vanilla extract at the end, and then let it sit after it's been simmering for about 10 minutes. Then you're going to sieve or strain through a mesh strainer, and then you'll be left with the syrup consistency. Put this over crushed ice and stir. 2 to 3 tablespoons of pumpkin pie syrup, 2 dashes of orange cocktail bitters, 2 ounces of bourbon, and a cinnamon stick for garnish. Enjoy. So what can we do? Right? I really do think that every single person counts. It sucks that we have to do this, that these big corporations are just money hungry, and they're like, oh, this is an easier route. Let's do the easier route, when they're causing all of this mayhem. Because as a consumer, we would obviously be like, yeah, just don't put that on the shelves. But if the thing on the shelf is the only option, that's why we choose it. We're not wanting to be a part of the problem and be polluting. We want to be able to go to a store and know that the products that we're buying are not single-use plastics and that we can reuse. Like, we'll do it, as a society. We're always following. I mean, it's the same thing with organic foods. Organic foods, what are you talking about? That's what it always was. It used to be everything you buy is organic. And now everything is, they invented the hormone injections just to make things bigger, but bigger is not always better. Your peppers don't even have flavor anymore because they've taken the natural, actual tasting of spice out of them, because they've decided that, oh, well, it's larger, it's going to be better. But you can taste the difference. Now with these organic, non-organic foods, you have to soak them in water to really get all of those toxins out. So it sucks that we have to actually considerably go into a store and buy organic, and then they're charging us more for it. When that used to be just what was available. It's like, duh, of course it's organic. That's what it is. And then they invented these hormone injections, which is terrible, and we keep taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. You can also support the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. That's another way that you could help with this. And, obviously just recycling and bringing the recyclables to the locations that they should go to, rather than thinking everything ends up in the trash or all things are accepted in the blue bins. And as I mentioned mentioned earlier, cars are actually going to be using aluminum more frequently. Like the new Corvette is fitted with an aluminum windshield surround. And there's just a lot more, examples of that. Like drive shafts are increasing in popularity. More rear wheel drive vehicles, like pickup trucks and sport utility vehicles are being fitted with them as well. So it's definitely coming into the auto industry as well. And just keep in mind when you're recycling, it only works when products are separated into like materials. So just make sure that you're combining the same, number of recycling materials and together so that when they go through the processing facility, it would make sense, right? You don't a bunch of different things separated. It's difficult for, the workers and the machine sometimes to separate, especially with plastics. Plastics are the trickiest of all of them. With the aluminum and the cans, the magnetic thing is great. But a lot of these plastics need to be separated specifically because of the difference in their numbers. So 1 to 5 is usually definitely those ones can be recycled. Anything above a 5, not so much. Now, there are people, working to find a solution with all of the plastics. The Earth Engineering Center is trying to find ways of recovering the energy that is used when incinerating these plastics. So there was a report that determined that the amount of energy contained in the millions of tons of plastic in the U.S. landfills is equivalent to 48 million tons of coal, 180 million barrels of oil, or 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So if this plastic were to be converted into liquid fuel, it could actually produce 5.7 billion gallons of gasoline, and that could power 8.9 million cars per year. So now that could be using waste to good use, but we still haven't gotten there yet. We still need to get our states and government to care about our poor waste management. Some countries don't even have access to solid waste collection. When the trucks are driving by, they don't have like tops on them, so bottles just flying out, which is why they say to crush the bottles so that they're not as, lightweight, I guess. And there's just a lot that we still need to do. The microplastics freak me out because they're in, shellfish and honey and beer and sea salt, because where do we get our salt from? From the ocean. And there's all these microplastics, in the ocean. They could be in stuff like toothpaste. They could be in shower gels or face scrubs, sanitary wipes, things that we use in our daily life. And then they get into the toilets, into our ecosystem. And the wastewater has all these little microbeads, just in there. And so we are literally just drinking plastic every day. Now, not only can you drop off your plastic bags and bubble wraps at local, grocery stores and things like that, just, call them ahead of time and ask if they accept it. But you could use bubble wrap in cold climate. So you could wrap your, reuse, and you could wrap your trees with bubble wrap for insulation. It's actually a nice little idea. I also have noticed that Glad brand has come out with compostable bags as well. So I might be switching to those bags. And then with Amazon being so popular, don't forget about your mailers that you get as well. Those could also probably be dropped off at the grocery stores and be, kind of in that bubble wrap, world as well. So just make sure you're calling ahead of time, call Target, call Walmart, call Publix, ask them if they accept those things. And you can check where your nearest location is at bagandfilmrecycling.org. Just type in your zip code. So that's a little bit of information on recycling today. I hope that you found it useful. Also, do your own research, check out your local facilities and how you can do better for our environment. And hopefully, the big corporations will do their part as well, because we only have so much control as a consumer. But do your best, really bring those bags to the grocery store. When they ask you for plastic, say no. Or if you're going to use the plastic, bring it back. Bring it back to the same grocery store that you got it from, and they should be able to recycle it for you. And just watch out for greenwashing too. It's one of those things don't always believe what you see. There's greenwashing where a company can purport to be environmentally conscious for marketing purposes, but they're actually not making any kind of notable sustainability efforts. So just be careful out there, use less plastic, reuse, and do your best. We've got this one life to live, and we should really be protecting our animals, our oceans, and ourselves. I don't want to be eating plastics, that's for sure. And that's it for me today, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. This has been Katie Rose, served straight up with a twist.